and welcome to our look ahead to what the papers will be bringing us tomorrow. I'm joined this evening by the education editor from the Sunday Times, Sian Griffiths, and the political correspondent from PA, Jerry Scott. Hello again to you both. A quick look through some of our front pages that you'll be waking up to tomorrow. And amid rising COVID infections, The Observer says the UK Health Security Agency, formerly known as Public Health England, has written to local councils to canvass their level of support for the rollout of Plan B COVID rules. The Independent has been speaking to health professionals who warn the NHS faces its hardest winter yet, as soaring COVID cases combined with a surge in A&E demand. The Telegraph says the Chancellor will use next week's budget to make a statement announcing plans for a digital overhaul of the NHS. The paper also has a picture of the head armourer on the film set where Alec Baldwin shot and killed the cinematographer Helena Hutchins. The upcoming budget is also the lead for the Express, which says plans to beef up border security will be at the heart of the Chancellor's speech. The Times leads on the case of a British soldier who has confessed to murdering a 21-year-old woman whilst training in Kenya in 2012. And as the COP climate summit looms, the Mirror claims Boris Johnson flew over 1,000 miles in 2 weeks by jetting between campaign trips and events on a private jet. So that was a look through the front pages. Sian and Jerry, lovely to have you back for our look through those front pages. And Jerry, you're going to kick us off, please, with the front page of The Observer. And we're hearing a lot, aren't we, about Plan B?
We are hearing a lot about Plan B, and so far ministers and the Prime Minister have said, you know, we're not there yet, we don't need to introduce new COVID restrictions. I say new, they're old, we already know them, don't we? Things like wearing of masks and social distancing and working from home if you can. But it sounds like, yes, the UK Health Security Agency, which is the new name for what we would know as Public Health England, has been canvassing local councils to see how ready they might be to introduce it, which the Observer is saying is the clearest sign yet that we might be getting there. You know, the pressures on the NHS and the rising infections and the slower rollout of the booster jabs than maybe was hoped. I think it probably is sensible to be prepared, but yes, this is a sign that maybe we are getting there.
It was quite a damning indictment, don't you think, Sian, to hear Professor Peter Openshaw basically saying, ignore what the government's saying and look after yourselves.
Yeah, there's a real kind of sense of deja vu at the moment, I think, where the scientists are saying, come on, look, we really, really need to be taking more precautions than we are taking to avoid COVID rates continuing to rise just as fast as they are. And then the government, on the other hand, saying, no, we're all right, you know, let's just wait a while and see how we go. And it kind of throws you back to, you know, last year, did the government act quickly enough to you know, bring in things like face masks? So you get that feeling again that there's a bit of a standoff, and maybe ministers are not listening to the scientists, and they should be. But I think what's happening maybe this week is that schools are on half term. I think maybe ministers are thinking, well, let's see, with schools being closed and children not mingling in schools, maybe transmission rates will plateau. Maybe this will be a bit of a circuit breaker. And I think they definitely don't want to bring things in before the climate change conference in Glasgow at the weekend. So, yeah, but it does feel like a very awkward time at the moment. And I think probably what the scientists are saying to individuals is, look, act responsibly. If you are on a crowded tube train, do wear a face mask. And that just seems very, very sensible.
I'm going to stay with you, Sian, because we're going to turn to your paper next. If you could just kick that off for us, please. It's NHS staff being forced, possibly, to have both jabs.
Yeah, so this is a story based on an interview that our political editor Caroline Wheeler did with the Health Secretary Sajid Javid. And it is, as you say, it's a story about ministers planning to enact laws to make COVID vaccines mandatory for NHS staff. It would be a very controversial move. This has already been done for care home workers. They have to have the vaccine if they're going to work in care homes. And now there seem to be plans to do the same things for doctors and nurses and anyone who's working within the NHS. Apparently there are about 106,000 staff in England who still have not been vaccinated in the NHS, which seems pretty extraordinary. That's about 7% of the workforce. And I kind of think it makes sense, if you're working with vulnerable patients, why wouldn't you want to be vaccinated to keep both yourself safe and to keep them safe? But there will inevitably be staff who won't want to have the vaccine, and then you have that problem which we also had in the care homes. Should they be fired? Will they have to leave their jobs? And then will there be staff shortages within the NHS? Will there be people to come forward to replace them? So, it's a very interesting story. And I think it also, it goes on to say that Sajid Javid has set up a war room. He's making other plans to try and ease pressures on the NHS. He's doing things like setting up community diagnostic centres and plans for surgical hubs, which could fast-track those routine operations like hip and knee operations that tend to, at the moment, people have very long waiting lists to get them.
Okay, here's a question to you, Jerry. Sajid Javid last week said he conceded that there is the possibility that we could hit 100,000 cases a day. Okay, so he conceded that. Now, if they are going to fire staff for not having the jab, where's the capacity within the NHS?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that is definitely something that he's going to have to grapple with. But of course, the cases doesn't necessarily mean hospitalisations. It doesn't necessarily mean ICU beds. I think what ministers are banking on is the number of people in the community as well who have had those 2 doses, and hopefully soon more people getting that booster vaccine. That will mean that even if they do catch the disease, it won't be as serious as it might have been otherwise. Of course, it's still very, very severe for a lot of people, and we are still seeing far too many deaths. But there has been a move from focusing on case rates to hospitalisations and deaths, and I imagine that is what the government will be pushing.
Well, it does seem, Jerry, as if everything has been placed on the vaccination rollout, isn't it? Because the Sunday Telegraph has got a piece on please get your booster jabs in order to save Christmas. We're always trying to save Christmas. What about after Christmas?
We are, and I think this is a message we've seen ramped up over the last few days. If it's not from the Prime Minister, if it's not from the Health Secretary, if it's not from health leaders, which is what we're seeing now. And rates have been lower than maybe has been hoped, but I did hear quite an interesting take from a member of the JCVI who said there are a lot of different vaccination programmes ongoing at the moment. If you think of the ones that we're seeing for 12 to 15-year-olds, the third doses for those who have lower immune systems. So they really are trying to push people to come forward as soon as they're eligible for that booster, which is around 6 months after your second jab if you're over 50, to get it booked in and get it done.
Well, let's stay with the front page of the Telegraph, Sian, and plans, it seems, being unveiled about what's going to happen with the Queen when she attends public events.
Yes, so away from the NHS, and this is a story about the Queen going to be accompanied by a member of her family at all times when she attends a public event. So either one of her children or one of her grandchildren. And the idea is that the royal family is very keen to avoid letting the public down in the event that there is a health scare again with the Queen. And this follows the Queen cancelling a trip to Northern Ireland this week on doctor's orders. And I think at the moment she's resting at Windsor Castle. I think sometimes she does so much and she's so busy. I think people sometimes seem to almost forget that she is 95, which is an extraordinary age. So, this story in the Telegraph, an interesting one. It's not saying she's going to stop public duties, but she is going to be accompanied on them by a close member of her family.
Jerry, like Sian just said there, 95 and still out and about.
Yeah, absolutely. And she has scaled back some of her engagements. You see Charles doing a lot more of the kind of, the knighting of people and things like that nowadays too. But she is still keen to do her duty, as it seems. And if we know anything about the Queen, it's that she is very proud of those duties and wants to carry them out and, serve the country. It does sound like she's resting up and is back at Windsor Castle. The PM said on Friday that he thought that she was back at her desk. So it sounds like she's got straight back on it, even if she's not quite back up to full speed yet.
We're going to stay with the royal family in a roundabout way, Sian, as we turn to the front page of the Times, and we've got COP26 coming up, and Prince Charles featuring very strongly in this, isn't he?
Yes, this is a story about Charles reviewing his fossil fuel fund. So this is the Prince of Wales's conservation charity, the Prince's Foundation, and it's launched a review of its policy for donations. And this is again before the climate change conference. We know that Prince Charles is a huge supporter of conservation causes. He has sympathised with Extinction Rebellion. But the problem here is that, in fact, he is expected to play quite a leading role in next week's conference. But the problem he has is that the Prince's Foundation seems to receive funding from the Saudi Arabian oil company, which is it's produced almost 5% of worldwide greenhouse gas emissions. So that's pretty embarrassing. This company has donated to the Prince's Foundation, and so I think the statement that has been put out by Prince Charles is that these donations are being reviewed, obviously in advance of this conference, because it just doesn't look great to be taking donations from a fossil fuel company when you're also preaching a very strong environmental message.
Yeah, Jerry, a lot of people will be asking, does his voice add weight or credence to the issue of climate change?
I think Charles is someone who has actually been speaking about this issue for a number of years. It was only a couple of weeks ago, wasn't it, that he said he was powering his car, I think, on cheese and wine, rather than the traditional fuel. And he genuinely is someone that has cared about conservation for a long time, more years than we've been talking about it. So this is embarrassing, and actually I think that makes it even more embarrassing because his kind of green credentials, if you will, were already boosted up, and like you say, he was meant to play a central role in COP. I'm sure he still will, but I can imagine he'll want to get this saga sorted out beforehand so he can say that it's been dealt with and isn't quite the embarrassment that it might be otherwise.
Okay, let's turn to the front page of the Observer, and it's Facebook on the front page. What's going on there, Sian?
Yes, this is a story about the Facebook whistleblower, Frances Haugen, whose revelations have been quite widely reported in America. She's coming to London and she will be giving evidence to MPs on Monday. And what she is saying is that Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook have done too little to address some of the harms that the social media giant has allegedly caused, that sometimes the company knew about the kind of harms that come from Facebook and from use of Facebook, and they didn't actually shut them down. And we've heard a lot about some of the harms that have happened, things like young depressed children, when they go on things like Instagram and they look for sites about sadness, they get deluged with very serious self-harm images, sometimes even ideas about killing themselves, and that has been linked to some deaths, and it's that kind of harm that Frances Haugen will highlight, I think, in front of MPs on Monday. And the question is, with the online harms bill going through Parliament, will we be able to do enough to persuade or even force the social media giants to take these kinds of issues much more seriously than they have in the past?
Yeah, Jerry, you're nodding away there. Your thoughts on this story?
Well, I think it's interesting because we've had the Culture Secretary, Nadine Dorries, speaking about online harms and online safety just in the past day or so. She connected it a little bit to the death of the Conservative MP, Sir David Amess. And, whilst she said that if we crack down on things like abuse on social media, that might not have stopped this, but she said it does highlight the threats that people in the public eye are under. So that's another strand to this, as well as the ones that Chance just highlighted. So I think there's a really big question for how far the government wants to go in this regulation. Nadine Dorries is talking about potentially fining companies if they break certain rules, the social media companies don't seem happy about it. Of course they wouldn't. But there does seem to be a kind of watershed moment coming where ministers are ready to intervene, and Nadine Dorries did say they're re-looking at the legislation that they're putting through Parliament in light of David Amos's death.
We're going to leave it there for now. Sean Griffiths and Jerry Scott, thank you so much for your time this Saturday evening. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And of course, don't forget that every Sunday morning we have another look at the front pages. Do join us tomorrow. Joanna Gosling will be with you, joined by the broadcaster Joanna Chanjou, and also the political editor of The Sun on Sunday, Dave Wooding. A more in-depth look at those stories inside the papers. So join us if you can then. From myself and the team, for now, good night.